Joseph D'Souza is not afraid to tackle big problems. He's been fighting for the rights of 250 million Dalits, the lowest of the low in Indian society, for years.
We want justice!
So it probably wasn't surprising that he would soon take on another mammoth and growing issue in India, the prostitution of over 1 million children.
The problem of trafficking is our #1 campaign issue globally. And we're going to be shouting it in the streets of India, in the Parliament of India, among the police, in the media, and we're going to go and fight and let the mafia. We know this is very risky. Many people are going to get butchered and killed because you're now, entering into the underworld.
Organized crime, right?
Organized crime, and they're not going to be happy. And they're watched.
But D'Souza has never let fear stop him, despite having his life threatened and property destroyed. He believes this is an issue worth dying for.
The one activity that is not risk-free is justice. Get involved in justice, you're putting your life on the line. This is not safe work. So it calls for huge level of commitment. But then we have to say, hey, if there are people in the world and there are ideologies in the world where young men and women are willing to tie a belt of bombs and blow themselves up and risk and give their lives because they believe in something, we, God's people, who are called for justice and righteousness, why would we be scared to lay down our own life?
And D'Souza hasn't stayed quiet either, speaking up for a group of people so mistreated, so discriminated against, that they are considered to be outside the caste system that rules India, completely rejected by God, and believed to pollute anything they touch.
Many of those children are sold into all kinds of modern forms of slavery because there's no other hope for them. So there are parents who sell their daughters. They're promised some great work or job in some other town, nobody knows what it is. And for a small sum of money, children are sold. There are those parents who are bonded laborers who are not able to pay their interest. So the landlords come and ask for forced labor of the kids. So then those kids end up working in factories. The Indian government says the trafficking problem is so big that it probably impacts directly or indirectly 100 million people in India. Now that is a huge, huge population.
And sex trafficking is at the forefront. Although Dalits aren't touchable in other ways, when it comes to prostitution, many of society's higher castes believe they are doing the Dalit a favor by having intercourse with them, a view that angers D'Souza.
The Dalits are untouchable in every way except when it comes to sex. Their women are the most desired, the most abused, and this is the hypocritical system that functions out there. They say we are untouchable, but then you go to any of the brothels in India, you go to any of the trafficking figures in India, 70% and more, maybe close to 80% of all trafficked people in the sex trade are Dalit and tribal girls. And now, because of the whole gay and homosexuality, you have boys being trafficked. And this is the horrendous fate that is inflicted on them. And there's no hope for them because they can't raise their voice. They have never been allowed to raise their voice. If they raise their voice, they're beaten, murdered, killed. So every day some atrocity is going on against the Dalits.
And one of the most exploitative practices of sexual abuse in India occurs right in its temples. Dalit families told they have to give a daughter to the local priest in what's called ritual prostitution.
The priest does some kind of religious ceremony. Then the priest is the first person to rape her, drug her, etc. And then when he's finished violating with her, she's sent off to some little house in the village there. And then during all of the religious festivals and everything else, everybody else comes and exploits them. And then there's this money involved, there's a percentage involved. And all of these areas, you have these villages where there are women after women after women. And it was outlawed in the 90s. We are in 2010, and it's growing. And those people who are caught in it, don't know what's the way out.
One way out is through rescue. D'Souza's organization, the Dalit Freedom Network, has rescued underage girls in the trade, but he says that isn't the final answer to the problem.
But the problem with just doing a rescuing operation is, for you rescue 100 girls, there will be 100 new girls next day there, because the system is breeding this. So what we are doing is looking at, okay, where does this sexual trafficking begin? Where are the villages in India where it is being? Who's running this racket? And why are parents selling these children? Why are parents being duped by? I mean, there are villages in India, and especially where we live in Andhra Pradesh, village after village, there's no girl child above the age of 5. Because the girl child is bought when the girl child is born, and at the age of 5, the brokers from Mumbai and everybody come and take that child and go away. And the parents have sold them.
The cornerstone of D'Souza's strategy is education. Dalits generally can't afford to send their kids to school, and if they do, they face painful and systemic discrimination. D'Souza plans to change all that, and he's just built his 100th school to educate these kids about their value and worth in God's sight.
So when we go into a school, before anything like this happens, we are there stopping the system from operating. So there's another way out. Okay, what can my kid do? You can come into our school. Oh, I don't have money to pay fees. Don't worry, we'll sponsor your kid. We don't have food for our kid. Don't worry, we'll give them a midday lunch. What happens to them once they go to the school for the future? We'll protect them. We'll take care of them. We'll preserve their lives for you. So this is a preemptive intervention before their lives are ruined. Go to the places where the slavery system begins, where all of the deals are done, and try to break that in the villages.
And with 25,000 kids in his school, plans to build another 900, and the second graduating class moving on in the world, Joseph says he's starting to see his dream become reality.
You have asked the question, how does anybody deal with a 2,000-year-old system? Of course, same issues with me in my heart. Is this ever going to happen? Is this ever going to collapse? Is this ever going to be freedom for the Dalits? 2,000 years, nobody's been able to do this. But we look back at 15 years, we are changing. You know, as I wrote in a recent article, I said, I think God has given us the way to change this whole system. It's going to be one child at a time, one trafficked girl at a time, one trafficked boy at a time, one oppressed woman at a time, one dehumanized Dalit man at a time, one community at a time, you know, one village at a time, you know, one area of India at a time, and then the whole nation. The tipping point will occur.
The children in these schools may never know what their life might have been, but they do know they have a huge role to play in changing their nation. With education in hand and a brave spirit that won't succumb to societal bias, these kids are the potential movers and shakers in a bold new India. And that's something 250 million suffering Dalits and Joseph D'Souza can't wait to see. In Burlington, Ontario, Cheryl Weber, 100 Huntley Street.